Today's Tea Time with the Suriel will help us understand why there is such bad blood between Tamlin and Rhys as we discuss the tragic backstory between these two High Lords. Because can you believe that before either of these High Fae were High Lords of their respective courts, they were actually friends? Rhys, eldest child and only son of the High Lord of the Night Court, is approximately 28 years older than Tamlin, who is the youngest son of the High Lord of the Spring Court. Rhys was 28 years old when he fought in the war 500 years ago, and the war lasted 7 years, making Rhys 35 years old when it ended. During the war, Rhys battled side by side with humans and fought for their freedom. Tamlin, as you recall from last episode's Suriel Tea Time, was a young boy during the war. Rhys confirms Tamlin was born when the war started, and then Tamlin explains he was too young to fully comprehend the ins and outs of what was happening, but he was observant enough to see and remember what was going on around him. So let's say that when the war ended, Tamlin was 7 years old, which means Rhys is about 28 years older than Tamlin. After the war, and once Tamlin matured, these two High Lord sons became friends over the years of attending various court functions. Rhys recognized Tamlin as a decent male for a High Lord son, especially compared to his awful brothers and the Autumn Court sons. Remember that Tamlin didn't want the Spring High Lordship title, but he also couldn't hide how much more powerful he was than his older brothers, so it was inevitable that he would someday become High Lord. Plus, with Rhys as a half-Fae, half-Illyrian who had to prove himself and defend his power, he understood what Tamlin went through and extended a helping hand. Rhys sought Tamlin out outside of courtly requirements and war camps and taught Tamlin some Illyrian techniques. He later reflects that maybe his help was actually out of pity. Rhys's family disapproved of this friendship, but Tamlin's father was threatened by it and their powers. He was weaker than both Tamlin and Rhys and wanted to prove to the world that he wasn't. So one day, Rhys's mother and sister were going to travel to the Illyrian war camp to visit Rhys. He was supposed to meet them halfway, but decided to stay back because he was busy training a new unit. Let's pause our story here to briefly introduce Rhys's mother and sister. His mother had been an Illyrian seamstress, and the mating bond snapped into place with his father when he arrived at the war camp just in time to save her from getting her wings clipped. While the High Lord of the Night Court was cold and calculating, Rhys's mother was soft and fiery and beloved by everyone she met. Rhys loved her fiercely, to put it simply. We don't know much about Rhys's sister, not her name or age or much of anything. We can speculate that she was fairly young. I'm just going to say at most a teenager, but that's totally just my own speculation. So anyway, Rhys had shared with Tamlin that his mother and sister were going to meet him in the Illyrian wilderness, and Tamlin, for some reason or another, told his father this. And Tamlin's father decided this would be an excellent opportunity to prove his strength against Rhys and the Night Court. Because remember, he was threatened by Rhys's power and his friendship with his son, and he was also probably a little peeved that the Night Court helped free mortals that he wanted to keep as slaves. So the High Lord of the Spring Court brought his 3 sons, yes, including Tamlin, to where Rhys had told Tamlin he was going to be, where he was going to meet his mother and sister in the Illyrian wilderness. But remember, Rhys didn't end up meeting them there as planned, so his sister and mother were all alone. The High Lord of the Spring Court and his sons murdered Rhys's mother and sister, the High Lord of the Night Court's mate and young daughter. That's bad. That's really bad here, folks. And it only gets worse. The High Lord of the Spring Court then sent their heads in boxes down the river to the nearest camp, and Tamlin's father kept their wings as trophies pinned to the wall of his study. When Rhys and his father learned of their family's slaughter, they winnowed to the edge of the Spring Court and went straight for the manor. Rhys held Tamlin's 2 brothers' minds and rendered them helpless while he cut them into pieces before he melted their brains inside their skulls. In other words, Rhys killed them. Meanwhile, his father went after the High Lord of the Spring Court and slew both him and Tamlin's mother, who Rhys's father had promised not to harm because they agreed they were not the kind of males who would do that, unlike the Spring Court guys. Rhys's father then headed towards Tamlin's room to kill him last, but Rhys tried to stop him because he was done with all this death. He was done with all this killing. He just wanted to go home. Tamlin opened the door to find Rhys and Rhys's father and quickly realized from the scent of blood that they had just killed his family. So he immediately killed Rhys's father in one blow, leaving these 2 High Lord sons staring at each other as the magic of High Lordship transferred to each of them right then and there. Then Rhys bolted on out of the Spring Court, and there has been a deep hatred between these 2 High Lords ever since. Kind of makes a lot of sense once you really hear the story, right? Now, I will say this, despite their mutual hatred, Tamlin has always carried a lot of pain and guilt about what happened with Rhys's sister and mother. After he became High Lord, he had their wings burnt.